Nick Fasciano, God bless you, sir. You are back. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me again.
We are coming in to a time that I'm so excited about. We survived the legislative session. Nothing crazy for the legislative session from Fish and Game wildlife standpoint, right?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Okay,
overall.
great. Well, I barely survived.
I could see it.
We did with you as well. Collectively, we did 170 episodes in 90 days, and you were on several of them. I was so blessed to be able to do it, but man, it was a lot. And my whole plan, the only thing I knew that was at the end of the rainbow, I was like, if I can survive this, we'll get into like the rec time frame of the year, right? So here we are mid-April, and we're going into this time frame, which is where Idaho comes alive.
Yeah.
Right. Like I have Susan Buxton from the director of Parks and Rec coming on in a week or two. It's just so great to be in Idaho over this time frame when everything starts warming up. I got the river's getting prepared. I have Chief Niemeyer, Mark Niemeyer. He's going to come in and talk about the preparation that people go through with the river, Boise River system and everything.
Yep.
Anyway, great stuff. You and I are here today to talk about an event that's going to happen and talk about a little bit of wildlife distribution stuff. But Rugged Idaho, this is going on in Caldwell. I'm pumped to go to it. They're trying to make a hub in Indian Creek Plaza to essentially bring a lot of outdoors and outdoors enthusiasts, outfitters, and things of that together, in that nature together to help the community kind of, get connected.
Yeah, I think anybody with an interest in the outdoors, which is a lot of Idahoans,
Yeah, right.
We'll have something down there. And so I'm going to be speaking about wildlife distribution and associated topics, which we'll be covering today. And so,
That'd be great.
But and there'll be a number of different topics there, but it should be very well attended. Anybody with a good interest in the outdoors can get down there.
Yeah,
should be a great time.
And that again, that's going on April 19th, correct?
Yes, I'll be speaking at 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
That's
April
right,
19th. God bless. That April 19th is a Saturday, right?
It is.
And
yeah.
they have a thing there. I think Friday night as well.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so,
yeah. But again, Rugged Idaho, very exciting. So
yeah.
Your topic of discussion there is going to be wildlife distribution, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Talk to me about this.
So, I mean, it's a huge topic, right? It covers a gigantic swath of everything related to hunting and conservation.
Wide distribution.
Yeah, exactly. So
terrible. I know. You're like, I'm aware.
I'm aware.
I've been here. All right,
but
sorry.
no. It is a huge topic, and so I mean, just to sort of paint the picture a little bit. I mean, if you think about like the iconic Idaho elk hunt, right? It's throwing on a backpack or getting a string of horses or pack animals together, heading off into the mountains, miles and miles back, where you can find basically unpressured herds of elk that behave like elk do when people aren't pushing them around, right? You're hoping you're going to get bugles everywhere. You're going to be chasing 400-inch bulls everywhere, and that still happens. I mean, like I on a regular basis, backcountry elk hunting is one of the most exciting things that you can do. I do it every year, but over the last few decades, there has been a shift in how elk in particular are using the landscape for habitat reasons, for predator reasons. There's been an increasing push from what used to be a pretty even distribution of wildlife to a little bit more front country. Now that's partly habitat and predation in the backcountry, partly how sort of the front country habitat has changed, right? We did not used to have as many pivot fields as we do now in the Magic Valley, for example. Those things are elk magnets. And so you've seen an increasing shift from general distribution to a little bit more concentrated in the front country and more concentration of elk on private land, which is inaccessible to most hunters. Not to everybody, but to like the general DIY public land hunter.
If I may ask, did you see the article on the Senate decision to be open to selling public lands to private people?
Yeah. So you're talking about the so right now through the reconciliation process, it's sort of being included if that goes through.
Yes.
As a potential revenue driver.
Right, and that went through. I believe that passed the Senate. Correct.
Yeah. Well, there was an amendment that was voted on to sort of stop that from happening, and that amendment failed. And so we're obviously pushing back against this. We do not want to see public lands utilized as a revenue generation source, right? And there's reasonable. I mean, within FLPMA, which is the Federal Land Management Policy Act from 1976, there's already a mechanism for small parcels of land to be used for something like housing development in an area that's already disturbed or something like that. But it's these larger, whether it's critical wildlife or access or anything like that, public land that we do not want to see go out of the federal management, because once it's gone, it's gone, right? And it's a very short-sighted use of a extremely valuable resource to
And
just pay for government spending that's just going to be gone once they do it.
And it's not even it's not a very valuable resource. It's invaluable in that it could never be replaced.
Right.
Like once it's gone,
We're never getting
it's
it back.
gone.
Right.
It's not like, well, okay, look, it's a pawn shop kind of thing. Like we'll get some money over here and then like we'll get, take the money, do some, and then we'll like buy that back eventually. It's like, no.
Right.
The Wilkes brothers are never selling the land they collect
Not
back to
not
people.
back to the federal government. They're not.
Yeah, right. And they're not like, and they're not selling it at a discount to anybody. It's like, okay, Idaho, let me help you get this. Like, no, man. It's gonzo.
Yeah.
Gonzo to the highest bidder.
Right. And so, I mean, that's one of the big things that we focus on is just articulating the value of this stuff and how, and that very point that public land privatization is a one-way street. We have access to this stuff. We've built traditions and, families have hunted on this on public land for generations. Nobody wants to see no trespassing signs go up in their favorite hunting spots, right? This is not something that is used for or should be used for short-term revenue generation, right? It is the heritage of all Americans. We all want our kids to be able to grow up on this stuff. We do not want to see it go away to pay for a government program somewhere.
I interrupted you. So distribution, and again, that part of the problem is that we do have private land that has started cropping up, and the distribution of wildlife actually takes that into account because you have these wide swaths of land that either the wildlife either lands on, and they're like, I ain't moving for anybody.
Yeah.
Or you have private land that blocks otherwise normal, classic modes of transportation to get to those public lands, right? So all of a sudden there's no trespassing. It's like, I don't even want to hunt here. I'm just trying to get to the, animals 10 miles away. Like, you're not coming through here.
Yeah.
And that's essentially two of the major factors that affect distributions.
So, I mean, landlocked public land is certainly an issue that every state across the West will deal with to some degree, right? Or fairly inaccessible public land just because of private land boundaries. That's definitely a concern. And there's ways of dealing with that, whether it be improving hunter-landowner relations or finding easements or these sorts of things.
Right.
If animals are on public land, there's people who even helicopter into public land to get to this stuff. And there's a recent decision in some states anyway that'll enable quarter crossing, which is public land to public land on these sort of checkerboard areas, which is a good win for public access. But elk are, they'll go where they're incentivized to go, right? They go for food, they go for security. And as elk have distributed a little bit more towards the front country, especially when you're getting, a large amount of pivot fields and places where they can just go chow down, right? They tend to park there and stay there for extended periods of time, which again frustrates everyone. It frustrates hunters who want to be able to hunt elk across the landscape, and it frustrates the landowners who have to, watch these elk eat up all their crops.
Okay, now why do they have to watch them eat it up? Is it that they need like a special depredation tag or something, and they have to like make a case to Fish and Game saying like, hey, there are 50 elk here chewing through $100,000 worth of product?
Yeah, so there's multiple reasons. I mean, there's definitely ways to haze them off, and sort of there's Fish and Game. They'll call Fish and Game. They can come in with different tactics to try and move elk off those properties. In terms of actually culling the populations, right? I mean, that has happened, and hunters, we generally want to see that as sort of a last resort in terms of, kind of one thing as we're looking at how we solve this issue. I mean, hunters are always going to want hunting to be the primary wildlife management tool, right? So to the extent that we can have hunters, sort of be the instruments for reducing populations where it needs to happen, and we can actually do regular hunts, that's always going to be the preference. But every landowner is different, and they have the right to determine who comes onto their property and who does not. And and oftentimes, I mean, it's a lot more than 50 elk, right? I mean, you're getting large herds of animals coming in, and moving them around consistently can be difficult. And so that's sort of the scenario that we increasingly find ourselves in, where on one side, there's fewer elk in places where we want them, and there's too many elk in places that we don't. And it's hard to really solve that problem. Especially, I mean, the level of activity that happens on public land, right? I mean, there's hunters, there's hikers, people on ATVs, there's all sorts of activity all throughout the year that incline elk to go where that's not happening, right? Which is on the private ground.
So there's and I'm sorry to interrupt. I hadn't heard. I knew that there was pressure. I have a fellow that I can't remember his name. He's going to be coming in hopefully next month to talk about the. It's like the HAT program or HIT program.
Hunter Advanced Technology Work.
There she is.
Yeah.
And this guy reaches out to me. So Nate is his name.
Okay.
And Nate reached out to me. He's like, hey, I'm part of this essentially committee that's exploring these things. And I've been hearing from people that is like, listen, when you have increased technology, you got hunters that can be way far away from these animals and have essentially an effective kill range that's, 10x what it used to be. That puts a lot of pressure on the animals. They got nowhere to rest because even if they're really far away from someone, they still have to be anxious and moving around. So I was aware, or at least people had told me, and they're like, listen, increasing technology, increasing number of people coming here specifically to hunt, that puts a lot of pressure on these herds and on these animals. And I'm like, gosh, that stinks.
Yeah.
I've never heard somebody, and it's of course sounds common sense now. It's like, yeah, but say you have like 1,000 people walking around or engaging in, motorized recreation, things of that nature. That's going to bother them too. Because even if there aren't hunters there, first off, they don't know that they're not hunters.
Right.
Like somebody's pulling up on an ATV. They don't know it's not somebody with a gun.
Yes.
And, again, just more stress on the animals. So no matter who's there and for what purpose, they're going to be inclined to steer away from that area. So then you have the more frequented areas that become these barren wastelands to large game.
Yeah. And at all times of the year. Right. So as you say, elk don't know who's a hunter, who's not. They're going to be predisposed to not want to be around people. And at least if they're not in a national park. And so, and that's one of the reasons why, sometimes if there's a, in the spring, for example, like around right now, and certainly, in the months leading up to this, when elk are particularly vulnerable, it's strongly preferred to avoid disturbing them. Right. Because you could just be out on a hike, happens all the time. People get cabin fever. They're like, we've just been through a winter. We want to get out and hike around. But if people start to go too early, the elk are still on their winter range. They're not in good shape because they just made it through winter and they did not have a lot to eat, and they start to get pushed around, and that's where you get problems. But yeah, all sorts of human activity will move elk around. Certainly, as you mentioned, technology has becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and sort of that dance between success rates and opportunity. Technology runs right through that, right? Like the better technology is, the higher our success rates go, the lower the fewer opportunities we're going to be able to have, because we're, if we shoot more, deer or elk, we don't want to see a population level impact. So fishing game manages knowing what the success rate is going to be. If the success rate is 10% in a unit, you can give a lot more opportunity than if the success rate is 40%, right? Because they're still going to want the same number of elk to get shot. So that's sort of the play there. But gotcha. Yeah, and anybody on the landscape can move elk around, right? And so once you start to get them more and more on private land, and again, this can be expensive. In 1990, a law was passed to require fishing game to pay for depredations for crop damage, and at the time, from elk primarily, and at the time, there was a decent amount of money getting thrown at this, but now it's over $1 million a year. Right. In, I think it was 2019, there was one single claim that was north of $1 million for depredation. When you get to specialty crops, elk can mow through a lot of groceries in a hurry, especially a lot of elk. And this gets to be very, very, very expensive. Right.
Wait, okay. What were they growing that was over $1 million?
I think it was some kind of specialty oats.
Some kind of kale.
Something. Yeah, something.
It probably wasn't
high
kale.
market.
It wasn't kale because the elk are smart enough to realize kale tastes like crap.
Well, whatever it tastes like to them.
That's trash, man. Whatever. Like, let's go get the yummy oats.
Yeah. Well, whatever they were eating, it was high value stuff, and it mowed through. So there's since been some changes in that to sort of cap how much a single claim can get. But that resulted in I think a little bit around 200 elk getting culled from that property. Hunters were not happy about that again, because sometimes it has to happen, but hunters generally want to see hunting being used as much as possible when populations have to move, rather than sharpshooters coming in and shooting elk.
Sure, but at $1 million for 200, that's like $5,000 per elk. That's a lot of money, man.
It's a very complicated problem. Yeah. Right. And improving hunter access over time, it requires improving hunter-landowner relations, right? And so we're in a pretty good spot right now in Idaho, where landowners, a lot of landowners that I know are hunters themselves. They're very good stewards of the landscape. But you can get bad experiences with hunters. You can get people leaving gates open, driving on wet roads, doing all sorts of things, leaving trash. It really only takes one or two bad experiences before people start to say, all right, enough of this, right? I don't want to just let any John Q. hunter on my property. And so part of the work that we're going to have to do over time to solve this problem is of sort of just this wildlife distribution and how we more evenly distribute wildlife across the landscape. Hopefully part of that will be finding ways to increase hunter access in a way that landowners can support. And every landowner is different. Right?
And if I may, so the idea is like, look, we have this collection on this private land. Let's just start with the private land issue.
Right.
We have this collection on this private land. And let's say it's an active agricultural area.
Yeah.
Right. There are a lot of things that we can do, but one thing that would be a dual purpose is adding pressure to that specific area by voluntarily, engaging with a collaboration with hunters. So then the elk feel pressure to move on, and hunters get a crack at, whatever animal might be there. And so the idea then is, let's stop making these the preferred location of this herd of elk or this collection of elk, whatever it might be, and let's get them to move on. That'll give more people opportunities, and it obviously protects the farmer or the rancher from whatever depredation they might experience.
Yeah, but it is a thorny problem because sometimes you can get great public access. You can get the elk off one property, they just jump on the next property, right? And then you're back on square one again. So that part is difficult. Ideally, again, you want elk evenly distributed across the landscape. But one of the things that we always think about on this question of just hunter access and private property, and as elk continue to congregate there, right, is is wildlife being a public resource, right? Like the hunters in America are rightly proud of the North American model of wildlife conservation. It's been one of the most remarkable engines for wildlife conservation and recovery in history, certainly in modern history. And one of the central tenets of that model is that the wildlife are owned by the public, right? Not the landowner. Right, that was the European model. In Europe, if it were on your land, that was your deer, that was your stag. They don't have elk over there, but
they don't have elk in Europe.
They have they have the stag.
Oh, yeah, interesting.
Looks very similar. Roars instead of bugles.
Oh,
but yeah.
I'm just saying. You ever hunted one?
No, I really want to.
It'd be wild.
Yeah, so, I got them in Argentina too.
My buddy's watching Game of Thrones again. I think they have some stags.
They have stags there.
Stags. Yeah, it's a good time. Keep going.
Yeah,
and apparently we have the not the werewolf. What is it?
Direwolf.
There she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the one that Jon Snow found, right?
Yeah. That was a full-blooded direwolf. I think the one that they potentially resurrected was not as a pureblood.
Yeah, but it's crossed with T-Rex, so it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Like, what could go wrong?
Yeah, I know.
And frogs.
Yeah, here we go. Brave New Worlds.
My oldest son is way into the Jurassic Park series. He watches all the cartoon versions, like the real versions, the whole thing. It's like, this is just, we're living in the future, man.
Yep, I know.
It's wild.
But I guess back to the past with sort of the origins of the North American model. Like because of that, we want to make and preserve the integrity of that model, right? We want to maintain, the public owns the wildlife, and
to your point, that's why we get fines where it's like, you robbed the state, you robbed the public of a resource. This is how much this resource was worth. And that's the same as like you opened an illegal gold mine, right? And you stole resources from you grabbed them out of the ground, right? Like, these have dollar values attached to them that we all get made whole on if somebody poaches. Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the reasons why, sort of the harvesting an animal is in the way that we do it in America is so unique. It's and it's obviously sacred to American hunters, where when I shoot an elk or shoot a deer, right, and I cut my tag and put my tag on that animal, I am taking that animal out of public possession and putting it into my own, right? There's a transfer of ownership that happens there. It goes from a public resource to a private one, right? America is where that happens, right? And if you go hunt in Europe, certainly throughout history, that was the whole concept of the king's deer. There was no change in ownership, right? That it's the king's deer when it's alive, it's the king's deer when it's dead, right? America is different, right? That is a public resource on the hoof, and once it is harvested and once I cut my tag and put that on there, it becomes mine. And that's one of the reasons why we have the model that we can, and we have a sort of hunter pay system for wildlife conservation, is that system really works. And when you're looking at how do you solve wildlife distribution in the long term, right? How do you distribute wildlife more evenly, or how do you, part one direction this conversation can go is at least how do you at least make landowners whole, so that they're incentivized to have to not just have a very negative view towards wildlife. And one of the solutions that you've seen some states go down is to compensate landowners by giving them their own tags for animals.
Sure.
Now, to some degree, especially for cow elk, that's a population reduction exercise. There's some level of tolerance for, all right, you own the landscape. We want to make sure you're a good steward of the land. There's going to be a lot of depredations. Here's some cow tags or something like that. Where it starts to get tricky is that one of the mechanisms that can be used to compensate landowners is to give them bull tags that they can sell, right? And that goes into wildlife commercialization.
Sure.
So once that happens, they can raise a lot of money off that. But that sort of does the opposite of solving the problem, where what we want is an even distribution of wildlife. If you're providing an incentive for landowners to grow big bulls in their property they can sell for more money, that sort of has the opposite impact. It does help with, it'll help the revenue streams from landowners. And again, this isn't meant to sound acrimonious towards landowners in any way. Like, strengthening partnerships with landowners is a key aspect of how you solve this problem.
Sure.
But we do not want to see things go down the road of wildlife commercialization. Hunters in general have a very negative reaction to this. And so, and there's limited cases where it happens. I mean, there's auction tags for sheep and stuff, because there's not enough sheep to really pay for their own conservation the way there is for elk. But that's one of the solutions that we want to avoid. And so, thinking about wildlife distribution as it continues to get more pronounced, the risk is that the solutions are going to go down that road, right? Or that that wildlife will start to become commoditized, because there's enough pressure on the landscape, and landowners are dealing with enough damages that they're calling out for more ways to fill that revenue gap.
Right.
And so, what we're looking at doing is, okay, how can we be innovative over the long term to make sure that we don't have to go down that road, right? How do we preserve the integrity of the North American model while strengthening hunter and landowner relations and getting the result that we want, which is more even wildlife distribution across the landscape, right? Rather than just throwing money at it and, helping, landowners raise money, but not solving the problem.
Right. And you're utilizing instead of resolving the problem, you're utilizing a public resource to pay off for a problem. It's like, okay, well, let's solve the problem instead of using the public resource to, just pay somebody off. Because again, once you start doing that, like you were saying with the cows, it's like, all right, well, then if you want population control, that's fine. But you're literally just stuffing money down this guy's throat because he has a problem. It's not going to do anything to solve the problem, though. Right.
And to some degree, depredation payments are the same thing, where they're very reactionary, right? It's like, elk ate this much in value, well, we'll pay you for that, right? And if it happens just every year that way, then you're compensating, and so and what you do need to do, but you're not going at the root of the problem, right? So and there have been approaches that could be more interesting, like maybe longer term contracts, right? Give landowners some confidence in what they're going to be compensated year over year, some like sort of a fixed income stream, and then maybe incentivize them. So, okay, you know what you're going to get. Now let's work together to try and reduce the depredation so you can come out money good in that situation.
Yeah, there's got to be something, because I always hate the idea that I'm experiencing or engaging a problem in my life, in whatever arena it is, it doesn't matter, that I cannot address.
Yeah.
That to me, it's like, obviously that should upset everyone, because
yes.
then it's like, oh, it's the state of the world, right?
Yes.
Like, I have come to terms with the fact that I look like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not,
exactly.
Whatever else,
better.
right?
Yeah.
It's not getting any better. Like, and it's like, okay, I get that, and like, that took me a long, like, then my right foot turns out slightly 15 degrees. It really bothers me, but it's like, okay, like, this is the way it goes, baby.
Yeah, science hasn't solved that yet. Yeah.
Right? And I'm not going to be like one of those guys. Did you know that there are a bunch of like tech people that are making themselves taller? They're like literally breaking their femurs and stuff and then stretching the bones. God bless those people.
No, you ever see Gattaca? Yeah.
Right.
This has been coming for a while.
We're in the future, baby.
Yep.
So the point is, it's like, I don't want to engage with that. So if you're telling me, if say I'm a landowner and there's this big problem, they're like, okay, these elk are going to come in here and we're going to limit how much you can get paid off, but you also can't go after the elk. And it's like, oh, so I'm just beholden to this wild thing that's theoretically owned by the state. So the state is then causing me harm and not giving me any tools or mechanisms with which to address this problem. Like, that makes, I'm not even a landowner, and like that boils my blood.
It's a thorny problem.
Right.
And it's not going to get better if we let hunter landowner relationships devolve into acrimony, right? We have to collaborate on this issue. We have different value systems in terms of like the DIY hunter versus what the landowner is conscious of. But again, a lot of the landowners that I've these guys are hunters too, right? Like they want elk on the landscape, right? It just becomes a question of scale. Once you get a certain number on your property, I mean, what are you going to do? It's going to screw with your livelihood, right? So you don't want that to happen,
right?
And then so how do we work together to find innovative solutions to make the cost of wildlife stewardship viable for landowners and to build out a better experience for hunters? Again, because hunters get frustrated when landowners get depredation on property that doesn't allow public access, right? Because that's sportsman dollars paying for that depredation.
Right.
Hunters get frustrated because there's not as many elk as there were in certain areas, and so it looks like hunters are more crowded in certain spots because we're kind of chasing elk in a more compressed and less accessible area. So there's some concerns over the crowding side of things, which is really just a wildlife distribution issue.
And if I may ask a quick question about something you said, depredation on areas that don't allow for hunter access.
Yeah.
So essentially, you have a landowner who's saying, "Hey, all these elk showed up. They ate my crop. I should be paid out in a depredation claim." And that depredation fund is fueled by hunters who are filling that up, and that goes out to preserve the elk or pay for essentially, "Hey, look, these guys ate your crop. We're going to pay you off for what the crop was." But the hunters themselves didn't have a shot. It's like, well, if you had let me onto your land, we could have taken care of this. And instead, you're just getting paid out without allowing the access to fix the problem.
Yeah. And so obviously it's frustrating, but it's landowners, and different states approach this in different ways. There's definitely hunters who would like to see an access requirement put into depredation, but it's not really feasible in a lot of cases. And so, but what we can do is work with landowners that are willing, work to get them more comfortable with some sort of hunting on that property, right? Montana has a master hunter program, which has had varying levels of success. The details really matter, but it's basically kind of a more intensive course of landowner ethics and how you behave on private property. That's helped quarterbacked by a lot of landowners and has an access component attached to it, where if you go through this project and you can kind of get vetted properly,
right,
then maybe some landowners will be more comfortable allowing hunter access.
Right. You have like a verification.
Yeah. Not everybody. There's no silver bullet.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking, just as we're talking about this, what if you had like a tracking mechanism? So you had a vetting mechanism. So it's like, hey, here's my license for like being a good steward of people's lands, like an Uber review.
Yeah.
Like you have something like that. And then you have some kind of just low grade GPS tracking mechanism that people carry with them throughout the property. So if there is a problem at a certain location, like trash buildup or something like that, the landowner can at least look back and be like, okay, who was here?
Yeah.
Right. I think we solved this.
Yeah, maybe that was it.
The Uber review mechanism,
the
verification, and then a tracking mechanism. Great. You want to come on my land? I want to know where you are.
There's ways of. I mean, there's we have our Access Yes program, which is landowners can voluntarily enter into this program and they get compensated for allowing hunters onto their property, right? And in most of these problems, Access Yes here, block management in Montana, you're signing in and out. So hunters and landowners will get compensated based on who comes to their property. So there's a record of who's going on there, right? But there's still not much of a vetting process there. And the goal is always going to be, how do you increase access, right? How do you make more landowners confident or comfortable allowing hunters on their property? There's some who just never allow public hunting, right? And that's fine. A landowner has the right to do that. But we want to see that increase over time to make sure that hunting can be used to help address this issue to the extent possible. Not all of these are really classic hunts, right? Some of them are more, there's a bunch of elk in that field. We need one taken out and we need them sort of dispersed, right? So the type of hunt that you're going to get varies quite a bit. But programs where we can maybe vet hunters a bit more and say, all right, if you're willing to go through this process, then here's some landowners who are more comfortable having you on their property. I mean, that could be one aspect of how you move forward. But the goal is going to have to be collaboration, right? Let's work with hunters, work with agencies, work with landowners, figure out innovative solutions to help solve this, so that we don't have to do any major violations of the North American model, and we can keep farms and ranches viable, and keep and improve the relations between hunters and landowners, and give everybody a good experience.
Man, that's the Idaho way.
Yeah.
Like, I am not telling you I'm some like 27th generation Idahoan. I'm sure there are plenty running around there.
Yeah.
But what I am telling you is every person I've talked to that has gone through some experience here that is somebody of repute. They're like, yeah, this person, developed this, or this person was fundamental in this. Every single time it was like, we had to figure out a way.
Yeah.
Like, we had to be innovative. We had to collaborate. We all had to come together. There wasn't a solution. We didn't look to the government to fix it all. And that's what it comes down to, which is like, we got to find a solution together. So landowners and the ag industry gets made whole. Hunters are not just funding depredation claims when we have no capacity to control the populations. Like, let's all work together.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be the solution. I mean, we've got working group models and things like that where we can start as, how do we get more face-to-face conversations? How do we build out programs that multiple people want to be involved with and are comfortable with and sort of help alleviate all this? Because we can see what's coming. And all of this that we've just discussed is, unfortunately, the easy problem, right? The tough problem, and you see this more in Montana, is with large landowners whose living does not come from the landscape, right? You see, again, and this is becoming an increasing problem in sort of the eastern sort of Idaho area where you have, larger open sky ranches. But when you get somebody who, sold their
Tech
software company for $50 million and then buys a ranch, or, oftentimes much, much more than that, and then buys a ranch, and none of their income comes from the land, they can have as many elk on their property and they don't care, right? And those elk will sort of live there. There's no incentive that we can give them financially to move those elk around, because again, it's pennies compared to what their net worth is. And then those elk can move on to their neighbor's property, and one, they're inaccessible to hunters. Two, they'll knock fences down and move on to the neighbor's land and eat up all their crops. Come back up on inaccessible land, and that's an even thornier problem to figure out how to solve that.
Isn't that the entire series of Yellowstone? Isn't that like the entire
I haven't
point
seen it,
of that?
Yeah,
I actually after a while, it was like after season 2, I'm like, I can't watch this anymore.
Listen,
like, it's just, I have my own problems. I'm just watching a show about problems.
People love it, and I'm not going to knock anybody who wants to watch something. It's not my thing.
Kevin Costner had a high note with Waterworld and Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm going to go into a deep cut. Yeah.
Oh my God. That one was so, when they
ate a penchant for apocalyptic stuff. Yeah.
You do?
No, he did.
He did.
Yes. Yeah, for a while he was going through a series of those.
He was the Mad Max of the ocean. And then, he had Prince of Thieves. That was a great one.
Oh, yeah.
That's when I realized that, like, women can be dangerous, because his whole friend, what's his name, was like, women possess your mind so that you would die for them. I'm like, that sounds terrible. I'm like, 10. I was like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm staying away from those girls.
Yeah. Made no attempt at all to make a British accent with that movie, by the way. It's just sounded like he was from Iowa.
Yeah, Marion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the years have been kind to you.
Yeah.
Why, thank you.
Yeah.
I love that. That was a great film. Yeah, Kevin Costner. He's like, but then they spun off. They have that spin-off like 1892. Which is like, they have all these. It's so bad.
It's a very popular series. I mean, people love that stuff.
I think people just like the idea of just this blood and guts and pain. Like, I couldn't even watch that. I think it was 1892. Yeah. But like, the first scene is, some Native American girl getting like her just like beat at this Catholic school, and the nuns getting beat, and the priest is beating everyone. And it's like, what is happening? Like, were people really this evil? And if they were this evil, how did this go? I'm sure there were some evil people, but like, weren't there nice people too? It's so much like pain and guts.
It's pretty gratuitous violence. And the few episodes I've seen of Yellowstone have a level of violence in modern day Montana that I certainly haven't experienced in that state. So I imagine they're probably,
but you're
overemphasizing.
You're not fighting the dudes who own the liquor license, and you're not fighting the guy who wants to put the condos in or the airport in, and like then they're blowing up Beth. And
no, that's true. I don't pay attention to that sort of thing. It's a turkey season starts in 1 week.
Does it?
I'll have my back to a tree calling it a big old tom.
Dude, I got to get Burke Mantell in here.
Yeah.
I got to have him back.
Guy's a legend.
Legend.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced the wild turkey to, well, there were like 50 of them, and Burke went out and found some.
Yeah.
And he went and talked to a bunch of wildlife people. They're like, wait, where did you find them?
Yeah.
And he was integral in starting to introduce turkey. So we had a turkey hunting season. I had him in. He was one of my first fishing game conversations. He brought in his turkey call.
Yeah. Great example of a guy who just loves to hunt, loves the outdoors, had some great ideas, and was able to make a big impact. Right.
Dingle Johnson and Peter.
Yeah. Pittman Robertson.
Robertson. Yeah. He,
huge amount of conservation gets funded through PR dollars.
Yeah. What a guy.
But turkeys, I mean, like that's speaking of wildlife distribution. I mean, and not a year goes by where I tell someone I'm about to go hunt turkeys, and they don't come up and say, well, you can just come down to my neighborhood. There's plenty down there. Right. Like turkeys have, just like all other big wildlife, figured out that, there's areas that are safe and there's areas where they can get chased around. So you're going to see probably when they start to gobble here, by the time this comes out, they might already be pretty heavy into it. You're going to see turkeys in neighborhoods. You're going to see them sort of in parks and places where there's just where they're not huntable.
Nick,
and so
listen to me. How far away do you go turkey hunting?
As far as I have to. I mean, like I'll hunt all around the state. We are in a good time. Well, I shouldn't say too much about turkey hunting, but don't
say anything.
Yeah,
just
but
please take me with you.
If you want to come, man, you are welcome to come.
I am all in.
Yeah, you're gonna love it
because I want to showcase these things. I won't tell anybody where we are.
Yeah,
but like helping. Look, I live in a neighborhood that is filled with a lot of people like me that move from out of state. Okay. And I'm not saying like, I didn't know that when I moved in, I just moved in. Okay.
Yeah.
And so many of those people have not been exposed to any of this stuff, right? Like it's just not a thing. And I'm not saying that we need to increase it, but it's like, Idaho has these amazing things. And it goes back, at least in part, to our public lands discussion at the beginning. Like this is part of what makes Idaho so incredible. And as somebody who's moved here and did not have the good fortune of growing up, like I had to cross over the BART tracks, you know, going to middle school and stuff. Like I didn't grow up, like I grew up around turkeys in that they're a safe place, right? Like, dude, Berkeley, when I was going to college, they had this turkey infestation. It was hilarious. So some of these turkeys got like Godzilla style turkeys. They were like 4 feet tall and they were chasing people down on bikes, not the turkeys on the bikes, but the people.
Oh yeah.
And they would like attack the people on bikes and the people would like fall over. And then you're on this ground with this, this modern day dinosaur looking down at you. And you're like,
oh yeah. No, it's
wild.
It's awesome. And it is important that people understand how great it is because, one of the threats that we have to hunting is the increasing disconnection between people who live in cities and the lifestyle that people like me love to lead. And when you think about public lands, I mean, somebody who has gone onto public lands and experienced a turkey hunt, right? Sitting there, listening to that thing gobble, and slowly comes out of nowhere, right? With this iridescent head. It's one of the coolest things you'll ever see in your life. You go through that, you will be a better public land advocate than if somebody who hasn't done that.
Teach me.
Right?
Teach me, Nick,
yeah.
please.
We're doing it.
We're in.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
Listen, I think this is a good place to stop. If you want to hear more, Rugged Idaho, April 19th in Caldwell, Indian Creek Plaza. You're going on at 1:00. They're going to be, I've heard they're going to be margaritas. I'm 100% sure.
It's going to be a good time. And I'll talk more about this and there'll be a question and answer session where you can come tell me what I got wrong, tell me what you like. We can brainstorm ideas on how to solve this problem. So it's going to be great.
It would be great. Nick, I always appreciate talking to you. Thanks for what you're doing for Idaho in IWF and participating in Rugged Idaho. And man, let's go turkey hunting.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it.
Thanks.